Good evening, Bahamas. Coming up tonight on our news.
The Shantytown census in its second week. Find out where teams headed this past weekend. Straight ahead.
The Deputy Prime Minister fires back at former PLP Chairman Bradley Roberts over his statements over the sale of the Grand Nukayan Hotel.
Our news is brought to you by Alive.
Welcome to our news and thanks for joining us. I'm Christina Dragovich. Topping news tonight, an awkward exchange between Prime Minister Dr. Hubert Minnis and the Royal Bahamas Defence Force Commodore over propeller damage done to a Defence Force vessel on Sunday has gone viral on social media. Giorgio Bain reports.
Row, row, you're mashing up the boats by the base. The PM red of the Commodore right in front of your face.
It's the 12-second clip that took all of 12 seconds to go viral. After arriving at the Freedom of Information Act workshop at police headquarters Monday, Prime Minister Dr. Hubert Minnis was greeted by Attorney General Carl Bethel, State Minister for Legal Affairs Ellsworth Johnson, then Police Chief Anthony Ferguson. But it's the snide remark he made when greeting Defence Force Commodore Tellis Bethel that had tongues wagging.
Commodore, yes, sir. I hear y'all still mashing up our boats. Y'all fellas need to know how to navigate. All right.
Minnis' comments come 2 days after Defence Force revealed in a statement HMBS Raleigh Gray damaged a set of propellers after departing Coral Harbour on routine patrol shortly after 7 a.m. Sunday morning. The exact cause of the incident is being investigated. Raleigh Gray had damaged her propellers earlier this year, resulting in replacement. This process took approximately 1 week to complete prior to Raleigh Gray resuming patrol. Within hours of being circulated, the clip inspired memes and even a song by Bahamian artist Solo.
Commodore, yes, sir. I hear y'all still mashing up our boats. Y'all fellas need to know how to navigate.
What I said? Commodore ain't like no one. He's hard like dumpling soup. See your face? See, I'm ready, my cool in that day. What I said? Row, row, you're mashing up the boats by the base. I basically watch it and dissect what was said, what was done, and then I just put it in my own creative way, and then I thought about row your boat, because he was talking about the boat. So I say, you know what, to make it catchy, let me use something that's catchy. So I said, row, row, row your boat, and then I came up with that concept, and then just like that it came out.
Despite its hilarious nature, Press Secretary in the Office of the Prime Minister, Anthony Newbold, suggested that it's no laughing matter.
Videos going around, people making jokes about it. The bottom line is we all want men in uniform, certainly those men patrolling the seas, to have the wherewithal and the capacity to do their jobs, which is to patrol the seas.
Newbold says he's not sure if officers need more training because they underwent training before the vessels arrived. While Newbold said he did not have the numbers on hand as to how much had been spent on repairing vessels, he promised to find out. Back in 2014, the government announced plans to borrow $232 million to purchase the vessels and carry out civil work. Then Minister of National Security Dr. Bernard Nottage said the cost for shipbuilding would be approximately $149 million, and the civil works are expected to cost $75 million. The government signed a contract with Dutch shipbuilders, Damen Shipyard, to build the vessels.
Watch out for the rock, boy. Tell you gotta navigate.
Reporting for our news, I'm Giorgio Bain.
Well, a Shantytown census is underway as the Minister of Labour and Chairman of the Shantytown Action Task Force get set to meet with Bahamian landlords. Jared Higgs tagged along with the task force and filed this report.
The yellow vests worn by these Shantytown enumerators signify that they come in peace. The government-sponsored survey of 11 shantytowns was in its second week when our news headed out to observe the procedure. It was a slow start as officials headed into the Carmichael Road police station to organize the day's events after 1 o'clock. It would be almost an hour before they emerged, separating into groups to visit these communities.
A team is made up of an enumerator, also a Creole speaker, and also several police officers as well.
Now, of course, we stayed on the outskirts of the community as it's a very sensitive process that the enumerators are going through, and they want them to feel comfortable as residents provide information for their survey.
We do want to be sensitive to the persons in the various communities that we come across, and we take the time to sit down and converse with them and explain the purpose of our visit. And we sit down and we deal with them in a calm and collect manner, showing them the utmost of respect.
Minister of Labour Dion Folk says all 11 shantytown communities in New Providence are on land leased to Bahamians, originally as farms, and that each settlement has a different landlord. The farmers, who previously worked the land, stayed put even as their trade declined. The communities around them grew, resulting in the construction of hundreds of unregulated structures with dangerously rigged power supplies.
The Ministry of Works is handling the physical structures, the buildings, and they are going by based on what they see, and they're also interviewing the residents. And then the other team, we're accessing the residents, and for the most part, our interviews are conducted with them right near their homes, wherever they're comfortable. So we've invited the pastors from the various Haitian churches to be a part of this as well, to shadow us and to also to reassure the persons that we mean them no harm and to get their full cooperation and assistance as well.
There is a perception that residents in shantytown communities are wary of outsiders. Despite that, Graham says his team was welcomed with open arms.
We got no adverse reports. We were all pleasantly surprised because some of us didn't know what to expect, but we found the persons in the community to be very hospitable, friendly, and very cooperative.
Reporting for Our News, I'm Jared Higgs.
In other news, Progressive Liberal Party leader Philip Davis says Prime Minister Dr. Hubert Minnis may be out of his depth after dragging his feet regarding the appointment of a substantive Chief Justice. This as Davis intimated that Minnis did not mention the acting Chief Justice Stephen Isaacs as his choice for the substantive post. Fonique Toot has that.
Before then, Chief Justice Sir Hartman Longley moved on to become Court of Appeal President. Opposition leader Philip Davis says Prime Minister Dr. Hubert Minnis had an initial discussion with him over who he was considering as the next substantive Chief Justice.
We did confirm our discussion in writing each other, and at that time he indicated that he was considering who he would appoint as Chief Justice, and until that decision is made, it would be the acting Chief Justice would be Justice Stephen Isaacs, Senior Justice Stephen Isaacs, and that he did not intend that Senior Justice Isaacs will act interminably, and that decision would have been made, I would have thought by now.
The opposition leader says that was his only discussion with the Prime Minister regarding the post. Under the Constitution, the Chief Justice shall be appointed by the Governor-General by instrument under the public seal on the recommendation of the Prime Minister, after consultation with the leader of the opposition. Minnis has argued that the Constitution also allows him a certain time frame to appoint a Chief Justice. However, the Constitution does not actually speak to a time frame.
But failing to appoint the head of another arm of government, is unacceptable.
Davis says by failing to appoint a substantive Chief Justice and failing to see the importance of such an appointment, the Prime Minister has once again shown a lack of appreciation of the institutions of Bahamian democracy. It has led him to question if Minnis is out of his depth.
And there could be no more urgent need to ensure that the arms of government are properly headed. We have a Prime Minister, which is head of the executive. We have the Speaker of the House, who is head of the legislature. We need a head of the judiciary. The three arms of government have to be, at least the leadership has to be populated. Again, it shows a lack of appreciation of the institutions of our democracy.
The Bahamas Bar Association, two magistrates, and Minnis' own Minister of State for Legal Affairs have all called on the Prime Minister to make a decision. When first questioned on the matter, Minnis said he had to go home to make stew fish. When asked again on Sunday, the Prime Minister said a threat by BPL unions to cut the lights off this summer is more important to him than naming a CJ. However, Davis, a noted attorney, says one has nothing to do with the other.
You're talking about apples and oranges here. The question of whether the lights ought to be remaining on is an issue that requires the negotiations between the government and the union. the question of an appointment of a Chief Justice, that requires a decision of the Prime Minister after consultation with myself. They're two separate issues. You have to be able to chew gum and walk.
Bar Association President Khalil Parker says the Prime Minister's recent CJ comments were nonsense. Reporting for our News, I'm Voni Tude.
Despite its campaign promise of transparency and accountability, Press Secretary in the Office of the Prime Minister Anthony Newbold says even after the Freedom of Information Act is fully implemented, that does not mean the public has the right to know everything. Jillian Gray reports.
While the Minnis administration promises to be transparent and open, Press Secretary Anthony Newbold says transparency does not mean full disclosure.
Generally, we hear transparency and we think we're going to hear everything. That's never going to happen anywhere in the world. It doesn't happen anywhere in the world. Freedom of information will be, those provisions will be enacted that are not yet enacted. Whistleblower and the Information Commissioner, those have been enacted. Even the information that you will access through the Freedom of Information Act, some of those documents that you will get, some of that information could be exempt from public viewing.
Plans to fully implement the Freedom of Information Act and spend close to $1 million on FOI training come as many questions put to government officials remain unanswered, like travel costs for members of the Minnis cabinet, the missing O-band file, when an environmental impact assessment for the controversial project will be completed, and the reason Centerville MP Reese Chipman was fired as AMMC chairman.
He said, I will tell you some things, I won't tell you all of them, which translated somehow into the Prime Minister is not going to tell us anything about what happened. But again, the Prime Minister will decide how much he wants to reveal about that.
When asked if the government is cherry-picking what information it shares with the public, Newbold said this.
No, I'm not cherry-picking. Freedom of Information protocols cherry-pick, if you're going to call it cherry-picking. There's some laws that govern freedom of information. And they say, well, this bit of information is exempt. Law enforcement, investigations, intelligence information, for example. Cabinet papers, for example. There's some things that are automatically exempt.
Newbold said that information will be shared and it will be sufficient for the public.
You will get information, sometimes for any number of reasons. Sometimes it's in the person's interest that we're talking about that some of that information is not revealed. Other times it's in the public interest that it's not revealed. But you will get information enough for you to be able to say, okay, I understand what's going on.
The Freedom of Information Act seeks to grant the public a general right of access to records held by a public authority, subject to exemptions which balance that right against the public interest in exempting from disclosure governmental or commercial information. When the act is fully in force, every Bahamian citizen, permanent resident, and registered company in the Bahamas shall have a right to obtain access to a record other than an exempt record. Reporting for our News, I'm Jillian Gray.
Well, Deputy Prime Minister Peter Turnquest hit back at former PLP Chairman Bradley Roberts over his recent claim that the sale of a resort on Grand Bahama has collapsed. Turnquest called Roberts a mischief maker. Jasmine Brown reports.
The Deputy Prime Minister says Roberts should be enjoying his retirement and not making false statements about the resort in Grand Bahama.
These comments by someone who's trying to hold on to the relic of the past is just unfortunate. It's incredibly mischievous and it is disingenuous. It is also harmful to what we're trying to accomplish.
Roberts said in a statement it had come to his attention that the now infamous on-again, off-again sale of the Grand Lucayan Resort in Grand Bahama is now off again, and the properties are back on the international market for sale. However, Turnquest says there is simply no truth to that claim.
The comments by the former chairman is completely false. The deal continues to be moving forward.
In a national address in January, Prime Minister Dr. Hubert Minnis said the deal to purchase the Grand Lucayan Resort complex was far from completed. The property has been treated as one of Freeport's last hopes for an economic resurgence, especially since Memories Grand Bahama, another of the island's large resort properties, remains closed. The DPM insisted things are progressing despite some delays during the negotiation process.
We certainly expect to have a completed agreement within short order. And I know that we've said that a number of times, but of course these things are very complicated, and they're further complicated by the financial nature of them. We want to make sure that we get the best deal possible for the Bahamian people.
While Turnquest did not provide a timeline for when the resort sale would be completed, he confirmed that American hotelier Paul Wynn is still the prospective buyer. Hutchison Wampoa, the owner of the Grand Lucayan Strip, signed a letter of intent with Wynn last fall. Reporting for R News, I'm Jasmine Brown.
Still to come on R News, the local government committee gets to work. And a little later, what's cooking this tasty Tuesday? That's coming up when R News returns.